SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Second Amendment Outdoors in Corinth, America's largest online firearms and accessory mall, has the best deals for you to stay loaded and ready, as well as covered head to toe in all the best brands. Whatever the season, whatever your game, our focus is all in the name. SecondAmendmentOutdoors.com, where freedom meets the field.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C Spire. Power your home or business with C Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C Spire. C Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy, howdy.
All right, we're all buckled up, ready to go with another show here on the midday 3-hour time slot. Chris Towner, Policy Director, Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, will join us at 10:35, and then it's Mark Formby, ex officio director and chairman of the Mississippi Workers' Compensation Committee. He'll be on MidDays in the Element Wealth Studio at 11:05 today. The Dow, folks, down 181 at this time. The NASDAQ down 23. We got some news on the employment picture this morning. I know you're shocked at this, Rhino. Revisions, once again, significant revisions to prior months. It's amazing that so many policymakers, such as our Congress, our president, our Federal Reserve, that's just from the public policy perspective. Then there are business operators, investors, institutions, lenders relying on this information. And let's just be honest, it ain't real accurate. But here we go again, another set of info released this morning on the jobs front. And here's the basic picture, folks. Unemployment rose in November from 4.4 to 4.6%. That's the highest in more than 4 years. The job creation picture. 64,000 jobs were gained in November, but October, we got a 2-month report here. We had a loss of 105,000. Negative 5,000 manufacturing jobs. And some good news. Government jobs decreased. So that's good to know as well. Payroll gains in November slightly better than the 45,000 forecast by economists as they were polled by the Wall Street Journal. They also expected a lower unemployment rate of 4.5%. I think the market is the job market, tenuous at best. Looks like that we are seeing some reductions in force, RIF, layoffs, terminations, but they're not really replacing them. But for the most part, employers overall sort of standing pat. Federal government, this is good news here. I think largely the result of a president and administration who takes an opposite view of the purpose of government, which is not to do everything and basically discount the private sector and private individuals and private businesses. The good news there is that the employment rolls of the federal government down by 270,000, that according to the Labor Department, since January. So slashing the federal workforce, a key part of the policy agenda of this president. 121,000 new private sector jobs over October and November. And, of course, that's pretty much what we need, actually a little below what we need, just to replace and keep pace with normal attrition. The unemployment rate, as we indicated, ticking down. You know where most of the gains are? Healthcare. Social assistance. Not exactly what's all included, what specific jobs are included in the category of social assistance, but that's according to the labor report I'm looking at. Healthcare jobs. Both of those had a gain of to combine over the 2-month period, 128,000 jobs. Manufacturing, transportation, warehousing, they shed jobs. So did typical white-collar information and finance sectors. Construction. Good news for the construction industry. Had a net gain of 27,000. So the economists look at this as, this is the phrase they use, Rhino, low fire, low hire. Not firing a lot of people, not reducing their force by a significant amount, but they're also not just going gangbusters hiring new people. They're not laying off workers en masse, but they're not just hiring a ton of new workers as well. It's Christmas season, of course. You got your decorations up there, Rhino?
Oh, yeah.
You
What little I do decorate it, it's up and done. How about yourself?
Yeah, well, that's a big deal at the Gibert house. It's something that Julie and I very much enjoy, and I'll admit, we go all out, but we enjoy it, and we love to share our home with others as well this time of year. This is something that Julie and I very much agree on. We just kind of love to go, I guess, bonkers and decorate the heck out of the place. And we do have assistance from our decorator and a couple of others. It's just something we like to do. It's our deal. Well, I remember as a child, artificial Christmas trees were kind of the thing. You were considered like, progressive, not from a political perspective, just from maybe keeping up with the technology and the times. And, those old real Christmas trees are that's yesteryear, right? We got to have these new
old-fashioned.
Yeah, aluminum foil trees with the rainbow spinning light fixture underneath. I
didn't live through that era, but from the pictures I've seen of the era, it seems like when the artificial trees first came out, there was an attempt to make them look real, but quickly after that, it was like, no, let's see how zany we can make these things.
That's exactly right. Well, tariffs, of course, are having an impact on the artificial trees because, no surprise, most of them are made abroad. So the prices for the fake trees up 10 to 15% this year due to new import taxes. That, according to an organization I didn't know existed, the American Christmas Tree Association. Of course, that's a trade group. Tree sellers cut their orders and paid higher tariffs for the stock they bought in. So that sounds like good motivation to get yourself a good old-fashioned real tree. Of course, the fake trees, the artificial trees of today, except for those that are trying to replicate and revive the old 50s, 60s aluminum foil trees that don't really look like trees. They're just kind of an ornament sitting there in the middle of the floor. But, the more pricey artificial trees look very real. They being the creators and designers and producers have really come up with ways to make those artificial trees look extremely real. Of course, I think that's kind of tracked the same situation with respect to just fake plants, right? They look pretty dang real, a function of innovation and technology. But
well, you remember a time when it was all the rage to have fake fruit.
That's true. We had it at my house. That's right. A basket of a bowl of fake fruit. And it was so realistic. Literally, I remember people coming over the house and like picking it up. Oh, wait. Right? That's not unusual. Oh, my gosh. Biting into plastic or rubber or vinyl or whatever the heck it was. Really something. Also, the president is leaning more towards rescheduling, I think is the way to put it, marijuana. And this would go a bit beyond the approach that the Biden administration had employed. There's a bit of a split going on in the Republican Party on this. You know that he signed an executive order, he being the president, recently, that classified fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. But he's looking at, is the president, reclassifying marijuana as a less dangerous drug, which could lift certain research restrictions and potentially make the industry, the cannabis industry, more profitable. A lot of money at stake in this decision. I wonder how folks feel about that. Many conservatives, Republicans oppose this move, have spoken up about it. We're going to take a break right now. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Hey, can you blow up some...
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
They're rolling. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
Awesome. On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, Ford Motor Company. They have pulled the plug on the EV vehicles. I guess that's redundant. On the EV business. How about that? They've been in it since 2023 in earnest. Said it's going to...
Pun intended.
Very much. Bolster its lineup of gas-powered vehicles, because guess what? The market says, nah, I don't want those things. They had such high hopes for the F-150, which, last I checked, maybe is the best-selling vehicle in America, if I'm not mistaken. It's
well, the problem with the electric F-150 was they majorly oversold it, over-promised its capabilities.
Totally.
And then weren't able to hold up their end of the bargain.
Right.
They underdelivered with a product that people were expecting to be like the commercial, where the power goes out and you've got your F-150 plugged in and your F-150 powers up your house.
Yep.
It can do that for 30 minutes to an hour if you got a full charge.
Yeah. And you're right, overpromised. So it only cost them $19.5 billion. That's how much they basically lit a match to in their experiment. Now, you know, this is one of those things where I feel like if you want to bankrupt an industry, just subsidize it with federal government money. And that's a fundamentally flawed business economic model out of the gate. This only works with federal subsidies. That's a bad business. And Ford learned their lesson. And relying on federal government funds to make the model viable is dumb business. Just going to say it right now. And look, the CEO of Ford seems extremely, Jim Farley, I've seen him interviewed many times, extremely bright guy. But my guess is this board, and we don't know what happened in those board meetings, my guess is this board said, oh, look, yeah, we gotta show that we're all into this climate change stuff. And you know, the president, the Democrats, and they're in charge, and blah, blah, blah. That's just what happens when you make policy that is ideologically driven, especially economic policy, tax policy, in effect, because of the subsidies. Subsidies to the makers, subsidies to the people buying them. If you got to subsidize it like that, we're not talking about subsidizing people with low incomes. We're talking about subsidizing these big companies on something that the market says, I'm only going to buy this if the government subsidizes it. That's just a dumb business strategy. And it certainly paid off in a negative way for the Ford Motor Company. You know,
it's almost like it's bad business policy to bend to the whims of a throng of useless idiots.
Very much true. Now, and it's also, you know this, we went through a period, less or so today, because I think these boards, corporate management has figured out we can't just bow to the ideological wishes of government. And that's exactly what was happening here. Almost all of these decisions that were made in the boardrooms, that's what they were driven by. Of course, remember, that was a government that wants to literally control who sits at the table in the boardrooms. You got to have one of them, one of those, one of these. I think that actually got enacted, if I'm not mistaken, in California, right? Right? If you're a corporate, I believe a public company over a certain annual sales value, there are some rules about what your board composition must include. Women, I think, is comes to mind. You got to have like 2 women if you're on your board. And it's just crazy that we make business decisions and we select board members on the basis of their physical traits, not their capabilities.
Yeah, they tried with AB 979 that required public companies headquartered in California to have directors from underrepresented groups, including Black, Hispanic, Asian, LGBTQ+. And they required a minimum number of women on boards, both of which mandates were considered unconstitutional and unenforceable.
Good. I agree. When I first saw that, I think we talked about it on the show when it was announced. There was such legislation that was traversing its way through the California legislature. I believe they call it the Assembly. And it's the same thing. It's like, no, man, you shouldn't be able to dictate to a private company.
Yeah, they did all of it during the summer of Floyd.
Right.
And the enactment date was by the end of 2021, and by summer of 2022, the courts had said, y'all are crazy.
Another knee-jerk reaction, all because of the George Floyd incident. Just more knee-jerk, but really just bad policy reaction. Now, I want to say there was another state or two, maybe it was Illinois, Minnesota, I don't know, one of the blue Midwest states, that they were also pursuing some sort of law that would dictate board composition. Just bad. I mean, that is it not a glaring example of socialism? You're got government telling you what your governance in the private sector should look like.
Illinois doesn't have a mandate; they just have a name and shame policy.
Okay. It's Illinois.
You got to report annually the demographic makeup, data on gender, race, and ethnicity of board members, and the data is made public.
That's just horse hockey. That's ridiculous. That's just, it's counterintuitive to the operations of a company. And I know these guys don't want to hear it, whose goal is to produce a profit by delivering value to society. Period. End of story. That's the goal.
Every time you say profit, I imagine somebody with pink hair hissing.
It's a dirty word to them, isn't it? Not, of course, understanding that virtually everything that pink-haired person uses in their life is only made possible by profit.
Including the dye used to make their hair pink.
Exactly. So I'm curious about what folks think about the president's announcement that he may sign an executive order that would reclassify weed, because the cannabis stocks, they surged on it initially. Now they pulled back since then because they're not quite as optimistic this is going to happen, and the president has received some pushback on it as well. A lot of people want to see it because it leads to tremendous amounts of research that can be done. This is what the president said, unless you reclassify. So we're looking at that. And I think, Rhino, as I understand it, I know you are more proficient on these matters than I, but it's not considered addictive, right? Which would allow, it's my understanding, that's what would allow it.
If it's still scheduled, it's going to have a risk of addiction.
Okay.
But I think the argument is more along the lines of medicinal benefit.
That's right.
Because if you are a Schedule I drug, which means it's basically saying it has a high chance of addiction and zero medicinal benefit.
Okay.
Whereas Schedule II has a high risk of addiction but some medicinal benefit. And Schedule III is a moderate risk of addiction with a moderate medical benefit, and so forth and so on. It's kind of already been proven that there are at least some medicinal benefits to marijuana when used correctly.
Okay.
So by it still being on Schedule I, it's misscheduled.
Okay. Got you. So making that distinction would change the game quite a bit for that product.
Yeah, because anything Schedule II and lower, I mean, you have laws and guidelines and rules and restrictions, but it can be sold at a pharmacy, whereas at the current moment, because marijuana is Schedule I, you can't use it. You can't distribute it through a pharmacy because pharmacies are licensed by the DEA, and the DEA is federal, and it's Schedule I federally, which means it has no medical benefit, and it's illegal. Yeah.
Makes sense. Totally get it. For our friends on the coast, on the Gulf Coast, WLOX down there on the Gulf Coast reported yesterday that razor blades were found inserted into loaves of bread at a Walmart superstore in Biloxi. And now the police have come out in Biloxi and said the same thing happened at the Walmart neighborhood market on Pass Road. That's just weird. Weirdos are out there, though, as you know. Chris Towner, Policy Director, Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, will be on Middays after this break. We are in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Seabrook.com.
Attention, adoring fans! It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. We're pleased to welcome now Chris Towner, Policy Director for the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. Hey, Chris, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
You bet. So I, of course, track your emails and your reports and analyses on a regular basis. Really enjoy them. They're very good, very in-depth, very factual in nature. And recently, you guys released some information about this $12 billion farm aid package that the federal government just signed off on, going to our farmers, many of whom are struggling. That is certainly a situation that's near and dear to our heart here in the state of Mississippi. What concerns do you guys have about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a little bit of context is that, the federal government is borrowing roughly, between $1.5 to $2 trillion a year. So the fiscal year 2025 deficit, which just came in October, showed a $1.8 trillion deficit. I mean, that's a massive deficit. That's larger than we had before COVID. In 2019, we had a $1 trillion deficit. Then we borrowed a lot for COVID, and then we were trying to get deficits down a little bit since then, but we haven't really made a lot of progress. So what is important is to note that we're already spending so much more than we're taking in tax revenues. Now, the Trump administration has taken that problem pretty seriously, and along with the trade priorities of the administration by enacting the tariffs that we've seen over the past year. The difficulty is that those tariffs have caused a lot of issues for farmers, right? There's been some retaliatory actions from China. There have been other trade partners where they're saying, well, if you're going to tariff our goods, then we're going to tariff your food production. And so there's been some interest in doing some sort of like bailout package. So the administration announced a $12 billion package of relief. And, $12 billion sounds pretty low compared to the, $1.5 to $2 trillion that we're borrowing on an annual basis right now. But really, every bit that we add to our deficits is making that problem even worse. So we're really concerned that, if the administration wanted to do something like that, they should really work with Congress and find other policies that will help pay for that proposal. And there are tons of policies out there that they could do that with. The problem is that, they would either, cut spending for other things or raise revenue on people or businesses. And no one really likes to pay for things these days. Right. So it's really a quagmire.
Yeah, so absolutely appreciate that insight. Chris, I did several months ago just some back-of-the-napkin math, and I approached it this way. I took Social Security and Medicare out of the federal budget, and even though it's not totally true, let's just assume that they're self-funded through contributions and premiums and other revenue that's dedicated to that. Although you and I both know that's not totally true anymore. Mm-hmm. One time it was. But let's just take that and just give that over here. According to my calculations, 40 to 45 cents of every other dollar that comes out of the federal government budget is borrowed. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That sounds about right. I'm trying to do the math real quick in my head. I mean, if you think about the Social Security program itself is about $1.5 trillion annually. So if you were to just take that out of the picture, then we would, there'd be no borrowing. Right. But that sounds about right.
Medicare's $900 billion, so $2.6 trillion, $7 trillion. It puts you down 5.5, 5.4. You got what? Couple and a half trillion of federal and corporate income taxes, some other revenue. That's how I kind of did the math. That works out to that 40, 45 cents of every dollar. The problem is, Chris, how do we get our lawmakers in Washington to have more of a business-like approach? Like, well, I don't have that money. I can't just appropriate it. I can't just approve that spending. It's done without any regard to the revenue portion of the income statement.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I think that part of the problem is they're not really facing any consequences for doing that, right? There are a few different consequences you could get. Politically, obviously, you could get voted out of office, but that's actually what they're most afraid of. Yeah. They're most afraid of putting in place changes to raise those revenues or cut spending and getting voted out of office because of that. So really, what we've seen so far is, luckily, as the largest, economy in the world and as the world's reserve currency, we haven't seen a ton of consequences of our borrowing, but that might be, coming to roost soon. We're getting to a point where our national debt, and we us economists look at it as kind of a share of the economy. Your economy being how much, income a business has or something, and the debt being how much, how much you owe. We're at about 100% of our economy right now.
Right.
The largest our debt has ever been was 106%, and that was just after World War II. Now, the way we got that down after World War II was also not ideal. There was rapid inflation that happened, and we had to, really, strap ourselves into paying down that debt, and no one really wants to get in that situation. So really, what we need to start doing now is start, slowly but surely putting in the kind of policies that will start paying for our borrowing. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of lawmakers that have a lot of interest in that.
Sure seems. And that 100% of GDP ratio you just talked about, that's just debt held by the public, isn't that correct?
Correct. Yes. So debt held by the public is the more meaningful measure for how that affects the economy. But that is not the equivalent of what I think most people know is the gross federal debt, which is about $38 trillion, almost $39 trillion soon, actually. Right. But that includes about $7 trillion that the government owes itself.
Intergovernmental debt is the category, I guess they put it in. Yeah. Yeah, and I was talking earlier about a more business-like approach. In business, when you go to borrow money, and even large companies, when they seek capital, well, that's the key thing that lenders look at. What sort of cash flow are you able to generate? What does your EBITDA relative to that debt look like? What is your revenue, assuming that your margins are kind of level? It's the same thing, and therefore the only way to, I guess, kind of make this debt picture work is to continue to grow our economy and expand that GDP.
Yeah, no, I mean that's certainly one part of the equation, and if we that's the denominator in the debt as a share of GDP. Yeah. And so if we did grow GDP, that would do a whole lot. Our estimates say that in order for us to get to a point where we're just growing the economy is going to help pay off our debt, you need probably somewhere a little over 3% annual growth, real annual growth. Now, 3% wasn't actually that foreign to us a long time ago.
Right.
We see occasional years where we get 3%, but the problem is you need it every single year.
Yeah.
And if you just look at the demographics of our country, we have an older population. We don't have nearly as many people working as a share of our population as we used to. And you look at the fact that productivity just has not grown very sufficiently. Now, maybe AI changes a little bit of that, but we're not going to get to 3%. We're looking at around 2% right now. And even with the large tax package that passed over the summer, maybe that moves us to 2.2% for a few years. But it's not going to get us to 3%. So we really do need to do something else that also, you got to cut the spending and you got to raise the revenue, or you have to do a combination of the two.
Right.
While also growing the economy. And
that same set of suggestions also applies to the Social Security and Medicare programs. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You got to have more coming in, less going out, a combination of the two.
Yes, and those programs have their own particular financial challenges. And I mean, okay, if we fixed Social Security and Medicare, we would probably fix a third of our financial sustainability problem, which is great progress. But Social Security and Medicare are very unique in that the Social Security Trust Fund is funded by a trust fund, which for many years was collecting way more in payroll tax revenues than it was paying on benefits. And then about 2010, we started collecting less in benefits, but we were still collecting less in revenues, but we were still making interest off of the amount that was in the trust fund. And now, in the last 5 years, we're actually taking out of that trust fund.
Right.
And by 2032, that trust fund will be completely empty.
Yeah.
And at that point, the law says the law says you get a 24% benefit cut. That is the default action by the law, through the law. So either Congress does something to prevent that, ideally helping to improve the finances of the program, or it lets a huge benefit cut happen for seniors that rely on the program. And I think we all know that they're not going to let that happen.
I totally agree. So we're out of time. We got to go, but I'm going to make one point. You got about 10 seconds to react. This time next year, I see our debt at $40 trillion.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're spot on. Maybe 41.
Unbelievable. Well, we enjoy talking to you, Chris, as always. Appreciate your insight. And I hope you have a fantastic holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And let's get that GDP up. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. You too.
We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Come on. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
There's a man who leads a life of danger. To everyone he meets, he stays a stranger.
Johnny Rivers, secret agent man. That was back during the primetime television era when all the secret agent shows were the rage. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I remember that one. The Mission Impossible. Those were kind of cool. And there were others. Bond, James Bond, of course.
I mean, there were so many that you had spoof shows like Get Smart.
That's right. Forgot about that.
And you can't forget the British version of The Avengers.
Ah, of course. I do remember that. The
kids nowadays think Avengers, they think of Spider-Man and Captain America and Iron Man.
That's
a certain
right.
generation thinks of Avengers and they think of Emma.
Yeah? Who's
I think
Emma?
that was her name.
Okay, who's that?
Oh, what's her face? I'm not that big of an Avengers fan. It's just reminded me of it.
Okay.
Yeah, Emma Peel, played by Diana Rigg.
All right. I've heard my kids talk about that. I guess The Saint. I remembered that one. Roger Moore. That's how he got his start. The debonair Englishman. That was But golly, you're right. There were a ton of those shows, those series like that, and I guess that inspired Johnny Rivers to write Secret Agent Man. That's awesome. Appreciate that. He, of course, if I'm not mistaken, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Johnny Rivers. I think he's Louisiana son, if you will. What we got on the C Spire text line here? That's 601-879-4395.
Yeah, he was born in New York, and his family moved from New York to Baton Rouge.
Okay, I thought so. And his accent, I think, kind of gives that away a bit. He made a lot of hits back in those days. I grew up, William and Brandon says, with a silver Christmas tree with a color wheel. Good memories. Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. They're kind of aluminum foil Christmas trees. I remember those as well, William. And, of course, back then it was common to put those right in your front room window in your little house and have that spinning wheel, turn the lights off so that you would highlight the tree with the wheel on it. Good times. Cannabis research is starting to show just how dangerous these new grades of pot truly are on the C Spire text line. I'm hearing that as well. Paul and Meridian, are we waiting for every state in the union to pass some form of legalization? Talking about the weed. Talk about no representation. Federal government needs to go ahead and legalize it and let states handle it from there. Republicans may need to look at what their base feels about this also. Still, to date, no one has ever died from a marijuana overdose. Well, I hear you, Paul. I'm not sure that I would agree that overdosing ought to be the standard, ought to be the test over legalization. It's a tough one. I don't think overall, I don't know.
Well, I mean, that is part of the decision-making process for taking something from behind the counter as prescription to over the counter is the lethality of an overdose dosage.
Yeah.
And if, put it this way, if drugs like aspirin or Tylenol had to face the scrutiny that they would face today if they came out today, they likely would be prescription drugs.
Really?
Because they have that much of a risk of serious harm if you take too many of them.
Okay.
Whereas in the argument from Paul, there are cases of people that died with marijuana in their system, and it's been argued that it was a contributing factor. But he's right. There is no one case of just someone ingesting, imbibing, smoking so much marijuana that they overdose.
And I guess that means like shuts down organs or something,
Correct.
right? Brain function, something that would cause one to die.
Like if you take 9 Tylenol and your liver starts dying.
Okay, yeah. I get it. And there, as you know, have been cases, and opportunistic plaintiffs' lawyers have filed those cases and shaken down the pharmaceutical companies on that respect. But most of the time, though, to your point, well, yeah, we clearly say don't take more than this, right? Which is about all you can do. You can't keep people from making bad mistakes like that. There is value, many would claim.
That's why you've only really seen in recent memory allergy medication and stomach acid medication move from behind the counter to over the counter.
Okay.
Because of the relative safety of if you accidentally take another.
Well, we had the Sudafed type drugs as well, right? Whatever the active ingredient is there.
Pseudoephedrine, yeah.
Yeah, in Mississippi, but that's been changed since, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, we're going to take a break right here. We got Fox News and SuperTalk News coming your way from the Element Wealth Studio. Mark Formby, ex officio director and chairman, Mississippi Workers' Compensation Commission, is next in the Element Wealth Studio. Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. Hour 2 of Middays is live from the Element Wealth Studio. We appreciate you joining us today. Now in the studio is Mark Formby, ex officio director and chairman of the Mississippi Workers' Compensation Commission. Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, man. So, well, tell the folks first exactly what does the Workers' Compensation Commission do? What's its function?
Sure. I can knock that out in about an hour and a half. So, as you know, if you work anywhere, you are covered by workers' comp insurance.
Right.
If you don't know that, if you work in a place that has 5 or more employees, then I'm telling you, you are or should be. And if you're not, someone's practicing it illegally. So the Workers' Comp Commission is twofold. The 3 commissioners act as adjudicators. We actually hear cases. We have judges that are out in the state, 8 judges. They hear cases. They decide those cases. And if you're satisfied with that case on both sides, then it's done. If you're not satisfied, you appeal to the commission. And the commission hears it. If you're not happy with our decision, it goes to the Supreme Court. So we act as adjudicators daily. We settle cases and we hear cases. We actually hold court in a courtroom. And then we also regulate the laws of the workers' comp code, of the workers' comp law, specifically self-insured. If you're a self-insured entity, either an individual or a group, then we totally regulate that. And then in cooperation with the Department of Insurance and Commissioner Cheney, we obviously are interactive with the insurers who sell workers' comp.
I got you.
So that's the nutshell.
Okay. So talk to the folks about when workers' comp insurance, if you will, would be invoked. When would it come into play?
Well, if you are hurt and you are hurt at work, excuse me, if it's causally related, you are hurt and you are hurt at work.
Okay.
And, of course, rarely, but we do have people who are not hurt at work, and they try to save the injury till they get to work, because workers' comp's good insurance. There's no deductible. There's no premium that you pay. Somebody else pays your premium until you get hurt. There's no copay. You get hurt, and if it's a workers' comp injury, then you get carried through that injury until you are at the best wellness you can be.
Okay.
And so if you get hurt at work, then there is a process, and that process should be that you should report it immediately. And one of the issues that we run into, because we're tough in Mississippi, so people try to kick the can down the road. And if you kick the can down the road too far, then it gets harder to prove that it was at work. If you kick it past 2 years, then you become exempt by statute. So it would be important that if you stump your toe, just let somebody know it. That doesn't mean that you have to file workers' comp, but it gets it on the radar screen. More severely, then obviously you would file and go to the doctor or the emergency room and let somebody know that's going on. And then there's a process that the HR people in your company or your manager would make you aware of. But generally, workers' compensation is for a worker that is injured on the job, performing the acts of his employment.
And the employer pays into that insurance fund essentially, and it's a percentage, right, of gross pay.
Correct. That's correct, and it's good insurance. We in Mississippi, there are things that we look at every year that we would like to adjust, like to fix, but the reality is that we're one of the best buys in the country. We have an injury rate that is going down. The cost is staying about the same, oddly enough, but and the number of controverted or contested injuries, those that don't just get settled immediately, tend to be the same. But we're down around 12,000 injuries, and that's total injuries in the state that are reported. Most of those are settled out. They get well. You go to the ER, you go to the doctor, you get your medication, you get your treatment, get your bone fixed, and then you go back to work.
And as I recall, Mark, that rate, that percentage of payroll that an employer pays, it's called the experience factor, is it not? Is that still the case?
I think that's it. Of course, I don't get as much into the side. That's the people that are selling the product.
Oh yeah, okay.
But yes, it is based on a percentage of some type, and ultimately, I deal with the people that I hear from the most are the smallest businesses. Okay. Because it's a bigger burden, regardless of the cost. It's a burden that they don't care. So 5, 6, 7, 8 employees. And I try to make them aware of the fact that it's like every other cost of business. It's even like your income tax or your property tax. It's just something you have to do. And if you don't do it, then the debt's huge. Okay. And every now and then we will see some small company that has 6 or 7 employees that did not have it, and they have someone fall out of a tree or fall off of a roof. And that becomes catastrophic, because then instead of paying a premium that you're not happy about paying, you are getting sued now because you didn't have workers' comp insurance and losing everything you have. Yeah. And we see that happen.
I get it. So talk about the insurance industry and market in general. That's gotten a lot of attention for several reasons. One is we've got this controversy in Washington with respect to health insurance, of course, but also just general liability insurance, property insurance. It's causing problems.
Well, it is causing problems, and the issue is, just to really get it down to where the cow ate the cabbage, is that insurance by design is a group of people that pool their money together in case somebody gets sick or their house burns down or they wreck their car. I mean, that's what, if you just boil it down.
Sure.
And then, obviously, over time, somebody has to manage that. And as you mentioned in your earlier segment, those people get to make a profit. It's a regulated profit.
Sure.
But when things start getting out of whack, and sometimes it's huge, when you have if you have homeowners and you expect for one of those homeowners to have a fire or wind damage, that works. If Katrina blows in and every house that is insured is wiped off the map, and then you find out that you have $600 million worth of money to pay out for $1.8 billion in damages, 3 times what was there, or if everybody's house burns because you don't clear the underbrush in a forest, and maintain that so the fire gets out, and instead of one house out of 1,500 burning, 1,500 houses burn. Yeah. So those things are starting to happen more and more, and as they do, they are affecting premium, they're affecting coverage. They've got insurance companies that, I'm a good example, my house is due in February for renewal, and they came in and said unless I replace my roof, they wouldn't renew. My roof's a 19-year-old, 35-year roof. So we went to battle over that.
I've had that problem.
Sure, everybody has. And so and that's them trying to mitigate. I get that. Everybody's trying to figure this out. But when there's more pressure on the premium pool, the amount of money that's been paid in, then something has to change. You have to either reduce the services, cut the renewals, raise the price. What you and I have seen, you were talking about, Christmas trees of the 70s. And what I thought about in that, if I may, was that every house had an ashtray, even if you didn't smoke.
That's right.
And people would come in your house, and they would say, do you mind if I smoke? And you were supposed to say, oh, no, and here's an ashtray. Right. So, and it was just, So anyway, I digress. During that day, when everybody was smoking in your house and you had a tinsel Christmas tree, if you got sick, they poured some methylate on it, or they rubbed some iodine in it, or they rubbed something in your chest, or put Vicks Salve up your nose, and gave you 3 days to recover. Now you run to the urgent care.
You're right.
You run to the ER. My wife's an ER nurse, and so the demand on the medical system is greater, which is a demand on the pool of money,
no doubt,
which is then satisfied by the premium. So the premium has to chase it, and then on top of that, nobody wants any liability, so they run every test. And I'm not knocking
100%.
Look, not knocking the medical industry.
No.
I mean, you go in, but they run a blood test, and they do all the samples, and they do imaging. It may be an X-ray, or it could be an MRI, and so you have to go through all of this, and that clock is, that price tag's ticking up, tick, 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 tick.
The bill.
And you go home, and all you pay is your deductible.
Yeah.
But the pool pays $10,000 for an ER visit.
There is an over-doctoring, I think, that's largely driven by liability, and which runs up the cost.
Well, and convenience. I can run in now and get that Z-Pack.
Yeah.
I can go get that pop, and I'm back at work the next day.
Yeah. In
the old days, it would take me 2 or 3 days, and I'd have had a headache, and maybe running back and forth, throwing up in the bathroom. It would have been a bad 3 days.
Right.
And so it's a blessing.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to pay for it.
Well, I regularly say the fundamental problem is we keep inventing more treatments, more procedures, more pharmaceuticals, more ways to address illness. That's great. Problem is it costs money and everybody wants it.
Well, and we create more pharmaceuticals to treat the same illness.
That's true.
One of the things that I have an epileptic son, severely epileptic. You may know something about my Eli. We went through all the CDB, all the marijuana discussion, and we were told by our neurologists, and I could get neck deep just in that subject another day maybe, but we are told all through the process it may have an effect, it may not have effect, but Valium has the same effect as a rescue drug, and it's been around for 70 years.
Unbelievable.
So
I see.
Complicated.
Appreciate you coming in, Mark. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir. That was quick.
Yeah.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well studio. We kept Mark Formby over the break. He, of course, the ex-officio director and chairman of Mississippi Workers' Compensation Commission, wanted to dig into a few more topics. So before we went to break, we were talking about just plain old property casualty insurance for homeowners. And, of course, if you've got a mortgage, for the most part, the mortgage lender is going to require you to have insurance. I mean, I guess you could have a mortgage that would be such a small percentage of the value of the property, maybe they'd waive it. But
so, my other life, I'm a realtor also,
okay.
And so no, I assure you that if you have a mortgage, even if it's owner financed, because every now and then I've sold a property and owner financed it, but either I'm going to pay the insurance or I'm going to make you pay the insurance because
just too much risk.
Too much risk,
yeah.
and especially where the value of properties has increased exponentially because of the amount of money it takes to replace them. The cost of everything, the cost of labor, the cost of materials, the cost of government regulations. I'm in Pearl River County most of my life, Hancock and Harrison County, because of the Katrina laws. That increases the cost of everything that's built down there because you're trying to build a higher standard. It makes sense, but it's more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So where I'm going is virtually everybody that owns property, a home, their typical residence, they've got insurance on it, right? They've got
they should.
Yeah, they've got, and so there have been a lot of shocks over the last year about when they get these premium renewal notices. I got one, and it's up, and there doesn't seem to be any relief on the horizon for this. So what's going on there? And it's particularly a problem in the areas that are more subject to catastrophic events, such as our coast. Florida, I know it's a huge problem. Florida, right?
Well, it is, and of course, when I was in the legislature, we would get in this argument, and we'd make the mistake of saying something about the named storm on the coast, and then we'd be reminded of how Mississippi has become new Tornado Alley.
Yeah.
We have suffered major ice storms in the last 20 years that we had not before. That's global warming causing all those ice storms, I guess. And so so it is. It's everywhere. A lot of it's just population driven too, if you think about it. I may be getting off subject a little bit, but as we have more and more people, we build on more and more properties. You can remember driving through the panhandle of Florida when you drove by beach house after beach house after beach house, and each of those beach houses was one property with a family of 4 or 5 people that visited. Mm-hmm. Now you drive by condo after condo after condo, which are 2,500 people in a block, and all those units are individual properties. Mm-hmm. So that, same thing with Tornado Alley. As more people move into any area that was once not occupied, we may or may not have more storms. We've just got more people in the way.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So,
and thus more subject to higher cost damage.
Right. And I don't know. What do you do about premium? The rate. You mentioned profit on the earlier segment, and what a evil term that is. Nobody works for free, and insurance. Premiums are regulated. Their profit is regulated. They are owned by people. They're in the market, so they're owned by people that want to make money on their stocks.
Sure.
So they want to make money, and so a big issue again. Even with property and casualty, we mentioned health insurance. Mm-hmm. I've got something I could say on life insurance too, but on property insurance, kind of the same thing. People don't absorb anything anymore. They're going to call the company, and so the companies are pay out. So here's an interesting twist on that. You buy life insurance. If you have a young family, or if you're like me and you were an old man and started a young family, you buy life insurance. And at some point, your kids grow up, you no longer need life insurance. You either stop paying the premium or you turn 70, which I will do next year, and you can't afford the premium anymore. All of a sudden, that big, lucrative, cheap policy becomes too expensive. So now you can sell the policy, right? You see those advertisements?
I have, yeah.
Well, that by design, it's kind of like everybody losing their house in Katrina. If everybody has a $100,000 or $1 million life insurance policy, and all of a sudden they have to pay on every policy, that goes away.
Yeah.
Because then you have to take your $100,000 policy and you have to divide that by not your life expectancy, but by how long you will carry it through your 70th birthday, and then you would have to pay $100,000 or $1 million in premium to cover your policy that they're going to have to pay out.
Oh, man.
That's
what
a twist.
Mess. Yeah, it's certainly got more attention, I would say, in the last year, just insurance overall. I think folks are also seeing that their automobile insurance is increasing as well, and a lot of that's because replacement costs are up.
Well, go replace. You used to replace the front quarter panel.
Yeah.
I got a fender. Well, now all unibodies have changed.
Yeah.
All that we are. And I had this happen. My wife had a little fender bender. Somebody hit her, and so their company called and said, that's no problem. We're going to come pick your car up and take it to our yard in New Orleans, and then we will settle out and tell you what we're going to do. Well, they took it to the car, and then they called me and said, we're totaling the car. They've got it in their possession.
Wow.
And so we would have probably driven it like it was, if they didn't pay us anything, but instead, so some of that is crazy stuff. The cost of repair, totaling cars that probably it's easier to total them than to risk fixing them, and that's what they said. Once we get into it, it could be this or it could be that.
Okay, let's talk about this just evolution in college sports, in particular in college football, the NIL stuff that's really transitioned these student athletes into almost like little independent contractors, and that poses lots of challenges for business insurance and other issues as well, right?
So huge discussion in the workers' comp world.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going to go, but it's not only is everything that you just said factual, it doesn't apply to everybody that plays. It depends on how good you are and where you play, because, if you play at a little Midwestern 4-year college that has no NIL money, then you get your scholarship and you play, but you're performing the same task as the person who is making the NIL money, and in some cases, $6 million in NIL money or promises of that. And so it's a huge discussion. There was probably some discussion along the way, even before my time, about whether a college athlete or band member or anybody else that performed a task that got a scholarship, how did that work? Are they employees? Are they getting paid? But they settled that out. But this is so different. I mean, you apply the questions. Are there more than 5 people employed on the football team?
Okay.
Are they told what to wear and when to show up and what to do? Are they under the scrutiny of somebody that controls their life as a part of that activity, like a carpenter or an electrician or anybody else? Well, yes, they are. Yeah. And so then, now we're no longer talking about scholarship money. We're talking about real payday. Yeah. And so those questions are out there. I don't know where it will go. I think Congress will ultimately have to weigh in. I mean,
really?
it will be because so then you get hurt, and who covers that? Your health insurance or your $6 million NIL money? Are you self-insured because you have that money? And I don't. I'm dancing around this because nobody knows. But for the last 5 or 6 years, every national conference that we have been to, this has been a part of the discussion, either on the floor in the panels or in private time sitting around the fire pit.
It's novel. It's new.
It's new.
Never been in this uncharted territory.
And somebody's got to manage it. Again, it may not be a workers' comp issue, but it's certainly an issue of insurance and insurability, because the more money you make means the more likely you are to play, which means the more likely you are to get hurt.
That's right. Wow. That is going to be a confounding issue until something sort of comes in and standardizes and normalizes all that.
Somebody will sue somebody, and then we'll start getting...
Yeah, that's usually what triggers it, isn't it?
The bills will be filed. One state will have an issue, and it will cost them a lot, and then every other state will run to the legislature, and the legislature will pass something to cover. Again, like your marijuana discussion earlier. One person does it, and then that opens up the discussion for everybody.
Man, oh man, it's upending it. There's no doubt about it in many ways. But this is a dimension of it I don't think most people thought about. I certainly haven't.
Well, I think it's like everything else in life. It starts down a path and then it grows wings.
Unbelievable.
So it has.
Mark Formby, ex officio director and chairman, Mississippi Workers' Comp Commission, former legislator and also real estate professional. and a musician on top of it.
I still want to bring my harmonica and try out for the house band.
I'm into it. I'm going to tell. Appreciate you coming on, Mark.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks,
it's been a good day.
Yeah, man. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
From the Seabrook
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic point aboard this tiny ship. The mate was a mighty sailor man, skipper brave and sure. 5 passengers set sail that day for a 3-hour tour. A 3-hour tour. The weather started getting rough, the tiny ship was tossed. If not for the courage of the fearless crew, the minnow would be lost. The minnow would be lost. The ship set ground on the shore of this uncharted desert isle, with Gilligan, the skipper too, a millionaire.
Okay, so what was the inspiration out of the blue to play that one there?
Look at the TV.
I just oh my gosh, aren't you creative today?
I saw it when I was looking up the Secret Agent Man. There was an ad for a DVD cassette of Gilligan's, and I was like, wait, Gerard's wearing the red shirt and the white collar.
That's right. I'm trying to get my head under it. There you go. Tell the folks what's going on there, what you did.
Yeah, if you're not watching on SuperTalk TV, you're missing out, because I saw that Gerard was wearing a similar outfit to what Gilligan wears on Gilligan's Island, so I had to go find a PNG of a white bucket hat, and I put it over Gerard's head, so he's got Gilligan's hat, because that was the only thing he was missing for the outfit.
That's right. I love it. What a great show that was, Gilligan's Island. Prime time when it first started, right?
Oh, yeah.
What a great concept and cast of characters. It was fun. Always looked up to it. Look forward to it, I should say. And then it became a rerun staple for many, many years. Still, I think you can catch it out there on some of those rerun-oriented type channels. But, yeah, appreciate that. That's pretty good.
I knew I'd kick myself if I didn't take advantage of that opportunity.
No, it's awesome. Yeah, you're right. I got the red sweater on with a white collar showing, and that he wore kind of a red long-sleeve shirt that had white inside the collar and the button-down area. That's pretty cool. Appreciate that. Very creative on your part. Man, oh, man. So, we've talked a lot about all the wasteful spending in government, at all levels of government, in particular at the federal government. But how the Congress is debating the extension of the enhanced subsidies in the Obamacare marketplaces, the GAO, we shared this with you about a week ago, conducted kind of an undercover operation just to see how solid are the systems used to administer the program. Turns out they're weak. They're terrible. And here's what we mean by that. The GAO goes in and created fictitious identities with fake Social Security numbers, never issued Social Security numbers in some cases, and they still were able to get subsidies. Of course, that means so are criminals and fraudsters. 100% of the fake applicants were approved in late 24. 100%. 18 out of 20 still receiving coverage in 25. And, of course, the systems approve the coverage with either fake documents that substantiate their income and the other requirements to receive the premium tax credit subsidies, fake citizenship documents as well, which, of course, gives rise to the problem of fraud committed by illegals. And so these brokers, They're the culprit. They're able to bypass all of these various vetting procedures and get people enrolled, in particular, in the coverage category where the premiums are $0. That the result of the Joe Biden era enhanced subsidies, where they kind of slid up those percentages up the income scale, rendering the 0, or actually it's 100 to 150% of the federal poverty level. That particular category, their premium costs are 0. It went from 2% to 0. And so they don't get a bill because their premiums are 0. However, the brokers send the bill, if you will, to the taxpayers. And the taxpayers send them money. This is a scam. And it's unfortunately being substantiated by this undercover work by the GAO, where they were easily able to sign up. This is 100% a function of terrible, inefficient, ineffective, poorly designed, poorly maintained IT systems, because it's a big electronic process. Shocking misuse of Social Security numbers. One of those Social Security numbers used for 125 different policies. Rhino, how can those systems be so bad? That's just like fundamental validation. This is like 1950s era, 60s mainframe era validation. You can't have but one unique identifying number. UIN, we used to call it. You can't have but one. Well, the Social Security number would be that. You can't rely on names, right? Because names aren't unique. But we're supposed to have unique Social Security numbers. And you can sign up 125 times? Who writes software like that? Don't answer that. I don't want to know.
Well, what I fear is that the software was, like, the worst case scenario is the software was written to ignore it. The likeliest scenario is that the software is perfectly fine and could functionally do what you're asking it to do. But the not my problem people have found workarounds to the software that have now become the software because they didn't want to deal with, it popped up a red flag. This says this is a different Social Security number. Yeah, we're not dealing with that right now. Just go on.
Or a duplicate. Hey, we already have this person enrolled.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think you're right, but I'll add
because
to that.
Because if you look at any time you have non-technical people working with something technical like software, they're going to find a workaround even if it's accidentally.
That's true, but you know what? The job of a good software designer is to prevent those workarounds.
In the private sector.
Correct. And in fact, I can tell you, and though I would know it'd be politically incorrect today, we used to write software when I was doing that, and our managers, the people that I reported to, that oversaw the development effort, the design and development effort, they would always say, you got to make sure it can pass the monkey test. Now, that may be politically incorrect today. And what they meant was, it's one thing to protect against nefarious actions and trying to subvert. It's another when you get the not my problem people. That's actually kind of guarding against the monkey test.
Well, it's very similar to, was it Yellowstone National Park that has the famous joke about, well, you can't keep the bears out of the trash cans because the overlap between smart bears and dumb visitors is a pretty big overlap.
That's a perfect analogy. That's absolutely true. I just maintain that all of these systems we're using to run all these programs are not well designed. They should not allow things like that to slip through, even with the not my problem people. It should make it painful for them is what should happen. The problem, as you say, is they probably can hit a button or two or switch or something on the screen.
Yeah, it's probably even unwritten in the training where they got somebody new coming in and it's like, all right, if this thing pops up, hit F7. It just goes away. You don't have to worry about it.
I think you're right. And that's poorly designed software. Just no, you can't get past this point. We're not going to allow that dirty data, essentially, to corrupt the integrity of the data stored. So $21 billion in subsidies paid out with no evidence of tax reconciliation. Because remember, these are tax credits. You sign up, they pay the insurance company, they being the government, pays the insurance company. You square up on your tax return. It turns out that because it's based on your income, right? So if in doing your tax return, the outcome is, hey, wait, we paid you too much because what you said you're making and what you made are two different things. You don't qualify for that much subsidy, or vice versa. It could be a situation where your income went down and they owe you more. But you're supposed to square up. That's the idea. That's the policy, the law on your tax return. Well, the GAO says, well, we found $21 billion in 2023. Now, keep in mind, it's a $130 billion program. So we're talking about $21 billion. That's significant. What, 18%, something like that? Without any reconciliation at all. It turns out that that's 32% of the advanced premium tax credits. That's just terrible. That's because, as Chris Towner with the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget said, no consequences. That's the fundamental problem here. There are no consequences. In the private sector, you do that, you're bankrupt. That's a pretty significant consequence. We just print more money. That's why it's all screwed up. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Up of Mississippi.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
The great B.B. King. Are you thinking about or planning for retirement? Do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. The C Spire text line, it's wide open, 601-879-4395. And speaking of which, Dave in Monticello says, it may have changed, but it was tied to your total payroll, a percentage of it. He's talking about workers' comp insurance. That's right, Dave. I just seem to recall that rate was referred to as the experience factor because it could be adjusted, which is pretty much the case of almost all insurance. The more claims you file, typically the higher your premiums are. And it's a small amount, relatively speaking, but it's certainly a burden on small businesses. I think, knock on wood, in my 33-year business career, maybe had one workers' comp claim. It would be unusual for a business like ours. Just don't have a lot of opportunity to sustain an injury on the job. I think this was racking equipment, as I recall. One of our engineers and pinched their finger pretty bad and had to go to the ER. Got it all stitched up and taken care of. That's about it. Dave says, though, speaking of insurance, something else that has happened this year for Medicare recipients, drug companies are no longer giving a commission to the insurance rep. So unless you buy another product from them, they will not help you with your drug insurance coverage plan. That puts the burden on the citizen. Not everybody has the means or are aware of everything they need to make a good decision when it comes to drug plans. Our healthcare system is in shambles. I agree with you, Dave. And, of course, when Part D was added under the Medicare, that's the prescription drug coverage benefit, that was added under George W. Bush, and it was done without paying for it, which is one of the reasons that Medicare's fund is being depleted even faster than Social Security. It's facing, it doesn't get as much attention as Social Security, but I think it is expected to have an insolvency scenario at or maybe slightly before Social Security does in about 7 years, meaning it can't pay all its benefits by the amount. It currently, because of Part D, passed without increasing Medicare contribution rates, it currently receives a fair amount of general fund dollars to just make ends meet in the Medicare program. But you're right, Dave. And the other point I think to be made here is that, man, buying health insurance on the individual market now, meaning you're not getting it through your employer where you've got HR people that can help you, and because you've got an insurance broker that works with your HR group, they're also very helpful as well. But when you're buying in the individual market, you typically don't have access to those kinds of resources. You've got to talk to somebody. And that's why I'm not as convinced that this idea of, well, let's just give people health savings accounts and let them go buy insurance, which you actually can't do with health savings accounts. But they could change the law to allow that. It's just complicated. It's a tangled web. There's no doubt about it. And so I agree with you in that respect, Dave, that most people just go into the exchanges that are in the individual market and input their basic information and income, and boom, you get a list of all the various policies, and you pick one, and off to the races you go. That's pretty much the way it works. It's an online experience for the most part. Karen in Oxford says a lack of consequences and a lack of follow-up, maintenance, and management. Agree, Karen, but just with respect to these IT systems that seem to be just deeply problematic, I don't even see how they passed basic testing, and there are kind of 3 levels of testing of IT systems. You start out with basic unit testing, and then what's called string testing, then full system testing. There are prescribed methodologies of doing this that have been around since the 60s, honestly. They've evolved and they've improved through the years, but the methodology for building IT systems, and now we have this approach that's called Agile, the Agile method. It's kind of changed the way we approach software development and so forth, and the other one is called, I'm trying to think of it, Ron, it starts with an S, like it's been about 6 or 7 years since I've done this, the Scrum method or something. Man, I'm embarrassed that I can't remember that, having been involved in it at a deep level. But it's just kind of a new approach to a more sequential methodology. But, oh, man, all that is evolved. It's unexcusable. That's the main point, that we have IT systems administering these programs in the government. Scrum, I think, maybe, Rhino, you see that? It just hit me, and it's an acronym that stands for something. It's incomprehensible that we would allow a Social Security number to be used that many times. It's just like fundamental controls and validation checking in software. Fox News, SuperTalk News is next, and then the afternoon portion of Middays.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Don't check your money because the Dow now down 455 points. The NASDAQ also in negative territory, down by 128. The S&P 55. It's kind of surprising because all those prognosticators were predicting we were going to have a very bullish December. We've had a good year. You can't deny that. But this month so far, not looking too rosy. But, of course, it's intraday, and as we know, things could change. You know, something pops up. Today, reaction to the jobs report. I think investors are struggling to parse that data, figure out what it means from an investment perspective. Now, I did see an interview early this morning with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He painted quite the rosy picture for 2026, and I certainly do hope that his forecast is accurate, because it is going to be a good year based on what he said. And he basically made the point that he thinks the cost of energy will continue to decrease and the cost of capital. What does he mean by that? That interest rates are going to fall. He's optimistic about that. The Fed taking such action, and that the combination of those two and what is promising to be perhaps the largest dollar value of tax refunds in the nation's history. That because the One Big Beautiful Bill Act went into effect January 1, 2025. And so when you do your taxes and square up with Uncle Sam by April 15th of 26, those provisions, which were likely not considered in your withholdings, your payroll withholdings. Most people are wage earners, and that's how they receive their money. And even if you're an independent contractor or 1099, retired, whatever, and you pay estimates, you probably haven't figured that in, that being the provisions that are cutting taxes that can't be baked into the payroll. That's the deduction for tips, if you qualify, the deduction for the premium portion of overtime, the deduction for automobile interest, certain categories, the increase in the state and local tax deduction from $10,000 to $40,000, and for seniors, it would be the increase in the standard deduction by $6,000 if your income is below a certain level and you're age 65 or over. So all of that means when you get ready to do your tax return, you're going to end up with a number that represents your total tax liability that's likely going to be less than the way you paid Uncle Sam throughout the year. You square those two up. Hey, wait, you got a refund. Estimated that refunds will be in the $1,000 to $1,500 more than for taxpayers on average than they were last year for those who received refunds. So that is thought to be an item of stimulus for the economy. The Treasury Secretary talked about that today. I am concerned that also could spark inflation. A lot of money in folks' hands. They go out and spend it, and that there's not enough supply to keep up with it, and we see inflation. But I think overall people are going to feel good about that, and that should provide some degree of tailwinds for the Republicans as they approach the midterms. But there's some offsetting, mitigating factors as well, such as health insurance. Natural gas is up. However, price at the pump's down, and in fact today the price of oil per barrel down again today. I think last check, $57 a barrel. Now, that's $7 or $8 less than it was a short 4 or 5 months ago. And you're seeing that at the pump. I think most people would tell you that. They're seeing some pennies taken off at the pumps around the state of Mississippi for sure, and in the country overall. So these are positive tailwinds for the economy. Sufficient to generate a 3% GDP increase? The Treasury Secretary believes so. That, by the way, it's down $1.50 now. Something's going on, right? There must be some negative economic news, because when oil falls $1.56 on a day when it's trading at $55 a barrel, something must be going on. I'm thinking that's also what's driving the Dow down. I don't know if it's the jobs report or something that's been released since then that may have traders nervous. That's what it looks like. On the C Spire text line, we were talking earlier about Ford pulling the plug, turning the switch off. We could come up with more metaphors, couldn't we, Rhino, of Ford saying they're getting out of the EV business for now, at least certainly not to the extent they're in, and taking a $19 billion charge off. And I maintain that it was propped up by direct tax credits, subsidies, if you will, to buyers of EVs. Also, lots of subsidies to makers of EVs on the C Spire text line. That's why I'm against school vouchers. Keep government subsidies out of private entities. Understand your point, but I would share with you that's not quite the same. Here's why. We're talking about letting people direct the money they paid into government for the education setting of their choice. This is not just printing money out of whole cloth and saying, here, go have some money so you'll go to a private school. These subsidies we're talking about for EVs, those were explicitly designed to influence behavior. That behavior being, go buy an EV. There's this gas vehicle over here that's just as good, but I'm going to give you some money to go buy an EV. That's different than directing the money that the legislature appropriates for your child that you sent them. And it's that amount per student. You're simply having control over that rather than the legislature saying, nope, you can only go to that school. That's all that is. And the school gets the money. So
the point would hold more weight if Mississippi could spend more than they take in. But
right.
The state can't do that like
That's right.
the Fed can.
That's right. We have to balance our budget. I mean, we can borrow money to do it, but in general, we're going to come up with this is how much we're going to take in, this is how much we're going to spend. That's right. And I know the lieutenant governor was on yesterday.
The federal government subsidies, there was no thought given to can we afford this?
Ever, as we've talked about. Ever do they think about that. It doesn't matter what they announce that they're spending money on. Just keep in mind that virtually half of every dollar that they promote and announce and vote on is borrowed. It's borrowed. That's why we're approaching $40 trillion, and my estimate seems to be consistent with that of Chris Towner, who we had on earlier. This is what he does. He's an economist. He does this every day, a Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. I'm seeing us being at the $40 trillion mark this time next year. He doesn't seem to dissent on that view. But allowing parents to direct their money to the education setting of their choice, even it would be another public school, that's not subsidies. That's a little different situation. So, and this is really promoting more free market principles in education. Let the public schools, rather than having a market where they can rely on all the students in that district, they got to go to my school. I'm getting all that money. It's a little different than we still sell EVs. A consumer can go buy them anywhere they want. But in this particular case with education choice, we're just simply we're taking the position that families know best the environment to educate their child, the setting, the school, than government. Right now, it's government. You will go here if you want to be in a public school. Oh, you don't want that? Well, you just have to carry the rest of it out of your own, cover that out of your own pocket. No, but I'm still sending you money. How do I get value out of that? Well, you'd have to go to the school that we dictate that you go to. So I don't really agree that is an equal analogy there. Oh, let's see what else we got. Ben from Madison said he's now got Gilligan's Island in his head after you talked about that. He also said, did Ben, that the Mississippi Medical Cannabis Act specifically protects patients from losing their Second Amendment rights. I would like to see the AG stand up and defend Mississippi law and the people's Second Amendment rights. That's a good point, Ben. And he also said earlier before that prior to that message, if they do reschedule marijuana to Schedule 3, I wonder how it would all impact that decision. If at all it would impact that decision. I'm not aware of any other Schedule 3 drug that also carries a ban on owning or purchasing firearms. Yeah, I think that's right. I know there's a historical tradition in our country to disarm those who are currently intoxicated, but not a total blanket ban for those who have ever been intoxicated. I hear you, Ben, and agree. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Check it out. Let's do this.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Back with you in the Element Well studio, talking about school choice, which you guys know is the top priority of the Speaker of the House of Mississippi as we approach the 2026 session. And that's really not subsidizing education, in my view. That's just, again, allowing families, parents, caretakers to direct the money that is carved out for their student child. It's not new money. It's currently being spent. No additional cost. It's just controlling where it goes. I think that's what's missing. Subsidies are new money. That's brand new money. Actually, it's borrowed money. Half of it is. Talking about EV subsidies designed to influence behavior, a specific purchase, because they know that without those, the market doesn't respond positively. That's the whole point. Oh, you don't want that EV? We'll give you some money. How about now? It's crazy. That's not what this is. On the C Spire text line, what about the parents that have already been paying a private tuition? Yeah, that would be universal school choice. They would be entitled to the money, again, that is actually designed to educate their student. And they would have access to those funds, to the amount the state does fund public school students. That would be universal school choice. That's a little more difficult, I think, to get through our legislature, but it is the intention of the Speaker of the House to put a bill on the floor to enact universal school choice, maybe phased in over time. That's the way they did it in Arkansas, for example, and some other states. But all the states around us have enacted universal school choice. You got a child in your house that is K through 12 age, you get whatever the money. You have control, I should say, of whatever the money appropriated is for your student child. Right now, there are 48,000, just under 50,000 private school students in the state of Mississippi. If they all decided to exit the private schools and transfer into the public schools, it would crash our public school system for two reasons. One, we don't have the capacity for them. We really haven't built the capacity to educate every child in Mississippi. And two, we don't have the money. Because they wouldn't be getting any money. It's the people with their kids at the private schools that are literally subsidizing the public schools. Because they're paying the taxes to educate their kid, both state and local ad valorem property taxes, most of which are distributed to school districts. They're paying both. But yet they're not using the services. And that's never really made it to the discussion, but it should be considered. Same for homeschool children. This is from Hutch on the 662. Absolutely, that would be another example. So it's clear. What I want to clarify is, as we've said so many times, this whole concept of school choice is just that. In general, it just means that there's some degree, some level of choice in different scenarios that families have about the education of their child and the funding. At the highest level, it simply means that the funding from the state level follows the child to the setting of their choice, be it another public school, a private school, a charter school, a micro school, or homeschool. That's the idea. That's the high-level concept. The legislature can enact whatever they want. And essentially take that high-level concept that we call school choice and then just create a plan and devise policy and provisions that are related to that, however they want. So, for example, in Arkansas, it started out as public to public, then it phased in public to private, but only, say, children of the military, service members, or households with a certain income level. And it phased all the way up to universal school choice. Everybody who's got a child of K through 12 age receives the state money to educate that child in an account that allows them to direct it to the setting of their choice. And that's the only thing, by the way, it can be spent on. And it doesn't cover full tuition necessarily for a private school. For example, if in the state of Mississippi, for use of round numbers, $7,000 a student, you want to go to a private school, it's $10,000. You get $7,000, you're responsible for the other $3,000 plus transportation. So it's not where we're going to cover your tuition to attend a private school whose tuition is higher than the amount that's appropriated to the child for public school education. And by the way, about half the schools, private schools in the state, their tuition's less than the public school K through 12 allocation appropriation. Let's see here. Thomas and Greenwood said something from Ron DeSantis here, and I totally disagree with the governor. He says AI data centers have zero economic benefit for locals. That's horse hockey. Once it's done, it employs like half a dozen people, and these tech companies will likely bring in foreigners on some visa. They're not going to hire from your local community. That's just not what they do. Well, Governor, all due respect, sir, nothing's preventing other businesses from coming into the area and hiring people. It's not like that. Well, it's either a data center or Walmart. That's just crazy. There's no such thing. No such decision exists. And by the way, Rhino, how did he post that little tweet there, that message there? What did he use to do that? A data center. So, Governor, no data centers, no posts. I don't know why people don't get that. Should we just say, hey, let's just quit the information technology economy? We don't need that stuff. Okay, China, come on in. It's not an either or. We can either have a data center or a Walmart or a factory. No, that's not how it works. Nobody is precluding you, Governor, or anybody in the state of Mississippi from bringing in those businesses. Nobody. Data centers don't stand in the way of that. In fact, they support it because they provide an enormous amount of work during the construction phase. In the state of Mississippi, I'm going to tell you, out here at the Madison site, about 7 years worth. Now you say, well, it's not permanent. It's still 7 years. That's a lot of people working for 7 years. And it's companies who will generate more profit, Mississippi companies, generational wealth that they've never had before. And that will allow them to expand, to raise wages, to hire people. And that will provide them the means to go spend more money, which boosts the overall economy. I know, second-order thinking here. So I don't understand why piling on that. Okay, so it's a big building with a few hundred people. In the case of Madison here, we're going to have 4 million square feet with maybe 1,000 workers, 1,200 workers that have to make an average of $66K for them to receive the benefits. But the other thing that the governor's not talking about, not considering, is the massive amount of property taxes that they will be paying, Governor, in those counties and school districts in the state of Florida. Massive amount. Even with a discount, a massive amount. In Madison County, Amazon will end up with a value of accessible property for tax purposes that exceeds the current value in the entire county today. They will be the county's biggest taxpayer by far. How could you not say that there's economic benefit? Surely the governor gets that. And should we just say, hey, no more data centers? So then what happens? We create a vacuum that China fills. Well, we're not going to work on that quantum computing. And by the way, all that cloud computing, all these companies enjoy now, so that they don't have to invest a massive amount in infrastructure they install on site that's not secure whatsoever, not hardened, and puts them at huge risk, which would, by the way, Rhino, make their insurance premiums go up. Wait, you mean those boxes in the closet back there? That's all you got? And if those go down, you're out of business? Yeah. Okay, your insurance, whoop, as opposed to a fortress, which is where your data is. Doesn't that get entered into the conversation as well? They don't get that. If you went and told all the companies that are listening to me right now, hey, no more cloud services. Get off your phone. Sorry. We shut down all the data centers. What are you going to do with them now? Nothing. Because they all rely on it. I know I'm on a rant here, but there's a way to do this in a responsible way. I'm not for harming society in any way. I believe this is a tremendous enhancement. Fortunately, our president gets this, totally gets this, knows there is no choice. We have to win this race for AI. Otherwise, we'll all be, as I've said, living under the red flag with a hammer and the sickle on it. I don't want that. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Take me home, country road.
From the Seabrook, Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Welcome to our shop
on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, now you have a good one.
Welcome back, everyone. Mo says, long way home, Supertramp, great tune. At a minimum, that 7 years could be valuable experience for a young worker starting their career. It could also be the 7 years some older workers need to make retirement. And by the way, Mo, just to clarify, that's not the typical data center project. It's usually a 2-year deal. But because I believe Amazon Web Services is going to continue to expand its footprint in Madison County, I'm estimating, it's just Gerard's opinion, and full disclosure, I'm fairly close to the situation, just serving on the board now since 2018 and being involved in the initial discussions going back to 2019 about this project. I do think they're going to continue to build, and that will continue to require lots of construction workers. A broad spectrum of construction workers, of course, and because of the nature of building a data center building itself, there's everything from the preparing the site itself all the way up through the final installation of what's inside the building. I mean, generally speaking, they're cavernous with a bunch of racks full of IT equipment. But there's physical infrastructure in the form of electricity and structured cabling, what we would typically refer to as gray-collar workers, and that's the primary staff that will be on site in the buildings, are not the people back at the Network Operations Center, which could be anywhere in the world, by the way, to control all that sophisticated equipment, that are more of an IT technical network administrator, virtualization engineers, cybersecurity engineers, applications engineers. I mean, just a host of different disciplines, technical architects that are involved behind the scenes. So that's right.
Real quick, I did have somebody ask me what a gray-collar worker is. So to break that down in simplest terms, you think of a white-collar worker as sitting in a cubicle behind a computer.
Yeah.
You think of a blue-collar worker as working with their hands. Gray-collar worker is somebody that's going to be computer proficient and likely have to do some things with their hands as far as cabling or installation or maintenance or something like that.
Yeah. Thomas
just
says,
in the middle.
Yeah, I agree. I'll be objective as DeSantis. This may be low-hanging fruit for him to pluck because I don't see data centers going to Florida given their climate topography and hurricane threats. I got to tell you, I thought the same thing about Mississippi for years. But I tell you what's happened and what's enabled Mississippi to participate in this phenomenon, this explosion of data centers, mainly driven by artificial intelligence and cloud computing in general across our country. Again, it's human innovation. It's technology. We now can build big buildings, 250,000 square foot buildings going up in Madison. You don't think they're subject to high winds with us now being in the dang the tornado path, it seems? We deal with that every change in seasons, right, when we got the air clashes. So now we can build these buildings affordably. That's the key word. We've always been able to do this for several years, but now at an affordable amount that can withstand, these things are wind loaded for 275 miles an hour. That'd be one heck of a tornado, right? What's an F5, 200 or something like that, the most powerful. So, and I'm not saying they're not vulnerable whatsoever, right?
Yeah, an EF5 is anything over 200.
Okay. So the wind loading technology in building construction has come a long way. And again, the key is like everything else. Scientists, builders, engineers have known how to do this. It's just a matter of figuring out a way to do it in an affordable way that makes it practical for use out there. So Gary in the Berg says, all for helping the schools that are not a good environment and maybe limited public-to-public transfer. However, not for public-to-private transfer. We pay our taxes for public schools but have chosen to go to private school for many good reasons. People worked hard and sacrificed much to build these fantastic schools with their own money. Keep them private. But, Gary, the people who would be transferring, right, they pay their taxes too. They're simply saying, hey, government, let me choose where to spend that money on this setting that I think, not government, is best for my student. So this idea that it's public money, well, yeah, the public you're talking about is the person that has the student that's transferred. Don't they get any credit for the money they pay? And again, I point out, thank God for the private schools and the people that did choose to send their students to private schools and bear that cost out of their own pocket, because without that, we'd all be paying more taxes to fund the public schools to accommodate the people who have their kids in private schools. That's just fact. If, like I said, if all 48,000 pulled out of the private schools today and descended upon the public schools, where's that money going to come from? Because they're already paying those taxes. We'd have to pay more taxes. Our legislature would say, oh, heck, we got more people than we got buildings and classrooms and teachers. Does that not enter the equation?
Doesn't seem like it.
Man, I'm not fussing at Gary, and he knows that. I'm frustrated with the lack of understanding of how this works. That's all I'm saying. And just this idea, and our lieutenant governor says, I'm just not for public money. It's the public. It's the student. It's the family of the student. That's the public. We're simply saying they can make that decision better than you can down here in this Capitol. That's it.
Is he in favor of standing up a state governmental agency that is just road builders?
Right. No. Same deal. And this idea
then his point falls flat.
Right, and I would also point that out when we have this argument about the insurance companies, right? So I don't like the fact. I'm really mad about the fact that they're able to scheme these systems, but I don't blame them. I do to some extent because they know they're doing it in many cases. Now, sometimes because of the electronics, they actually don't know they're doing it. But you know what? They could run some filters on their data. Know that that's a data function. You know why they don't? They don't want to know. They don't want to know. We got all these people. We're getting money from the government to cover, but they're not using it because they don't even know they have it. But this idea that we hear that, well, wait, all that money's coming from the government. We don't want to do that. We don't want to send that money direct to them. What do you think happens at Ingalls Shipbuilders down the road here? How much money do they get from government? That's a private company, but they're providing a service to the taxpayers. They build ships. I don't have a problem with that. And that's just one of the millions of examples. And all of a sudden now, and again, I'm not defending health insurance. I'm arguing with that argument. That doesn't hold water until we just say, hey, just like you said, we build all our roads here in Mississippi. We don't have private contractors building roads. If we did that, then we could say, yeah, no public money goes to any private. And all the other litany of services provided by private entities in our state, because that's considered to be the most efficient and effective way for the taxpayer. And the same people that don't like that also say, we got to shrink government. Well, how do you do that if you're going to governmentize all these functions? Like, to your point, if all of a sudden the government did all its own road building, which, by the way, the vast majority of it, as you know, is done by a handful of private road builders. If all that became government, is that going to shrink government? Quite the opposite. Man, I'm for anything we can outsource to the private sector, let's do it. That's how you shrink government. It's like every job, every agency, every function, every task, every role. Hey, is that something the private sector could do better? And we'd pay them and we'd eliminate. The problem is, you know, how the heck do you get rid of all these people and all that bureaucracy? Well, we've always done it that way. Right? That's the response you get. Without somebody shining the light and saying, maybe there's a better way to do this. Like we have to do in the private sector all the time. Especially when your competition shows up and says, we figured out a better way to do that. You either respond or you get clobbered. Well, government doesn't have to worry about that.
Case in point, I bring it back up. Look at the metric of the poverty line and how it was defined as how much it cost to feed you in 1960-something. Hadn't been updated, hasn't been revisited. We're just still sticking with a metric that is long out of date because the federal government is the most inefficient waste of money on the friggin' planet.
No doubt about it. And Bob in Starkville says, Delbert, the Democrat, said yesterday, we already have public-to-public school choice and it works great. Total BS. I agree, Bubba. That is total BS. Because the transfer or school, that'd be the home school, the one that a student would say, hey, please, may I, Mr. transfer to the school down the street here that's in another district because I think it's better for my child. And the board says, oh, no, we'd lose that $7,000, right? That's exactly what happens. Yeah, it's not a smooth process that hardly anybody can use. Coming right back with the final segment.
Carter Jewelers.
Properly set all controls before recording.
All systems go.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
So while we're talking about this data center phenomenon, you've seen that Elon Musk and his company, I think it's called Space Cloud, their plan is to build data centers in space. They're already piloting some of that technology. That's just incredible. It's pretty cool. There are benefits to that. I don't think that's practical today, but I like to see inventors working on stuff like that as an option. By the way, he is inching ever closer to becoming a trillionaire, and the left will lose their minds over that. He's getting close. On paper, of course. Mo says, I still say opposing school choice should support making students go to certain trade schools or colleges based in their zip code. I don't agree with that, Mose. I don't think you should be forced to do something like that. I think it makes sense for some people. If you're talking about if on their own accord they go to a trade school or a college, they should have to go to one in their zip code if that exists. I get it. If you're trying to sort of make the case for having the option of attending the school of your choice. Because you're right, there's a big public sector funding component of that as well. On the C Spire text line, and then I'm going to let Rhino tell you in a second here something he just told me over the break about more information coming out over this Australian massacre on the beach there over the weekend. Would your version of public-to-public transfer allow in-session transfers to occur? I'll be honest with you, that's on the C Spire text line. I would need to talk to public school administrators about that before I would offer an opinion. I don't know what kind of problems, if any, that would cause. I need to do some polling and some soul searching with some of those and just frank discussions with those people. It seems like that would cause chaos, in my view. I'm not sure, but it would be difficult to. Oh wait, you're coming in, you're going out. I just think that would maybe be a bit of an administrative problem. And just a problem in the classrooms with the students and the teachers. I'd have to think about it, honestly. And really, not just think about it and form an opinion, but talk to people who deal with this and understand what sort of problems it would pose before I would offer an opinion on that. Mo says, read it again, those who oppose school choice should feel that way. I agree, and I think I did sort of clean that up, Mose. I appreciate you pointing that out, that, yeah, it's equivalent. Right, you would be forced to go to a trade school or a college, based on, you live in this zip code, you go here. You live in this, same deal. I agree, Mose. And it kind of blows up the opposition to school choice. So would all money go to all students in private schools or just the people that transfer there? So, yeah, again, when we get to a point, if we should ever get to that point where everybody has access to the money no matter what their circumstances are, that would be called universal school choice, not just those who choose to transfer today, even those who currently have students in their school. And that would, by the way, cost a pretty penny, about $350 million a year. That may be objectionable, but these people are bearing the cost right now for the public schools. Tell the folks what's going on in Australia you just learned about.
Yeah, in the last 12, 18 hours or so, reports are coming out regarding the Bondi Beach shooting. And I think most people that have looked into it have seen the video of the heroic actions of the bystander that ambushed one of the shooters and disarmed him and then pointed the gun at him, didn't pull the trigger, whatever.
Okay.
Apparently, the 2 gunshot wounds that he received were not in the altercation of disarming the terrorist. It's now being reported that it was responding law enforcement that shot him.
Unbelievable. And what about the female police officers?
There's also pictures coming out of female police officers on the scene with their hands up. There's a video of one of them hiding behind a car, and another one where they're having to be forced towards the action by a male officer.
This sounds like the consequences of wokeness to me in law enforcement, where there's no place for it whatsoever.
It's almost like the G.I. Janes and real girl bosses of the world are few and far between, but we've convinced an entire generation or two that it's possible when it's not reality.
And let's be clear. That's generalizing, and that's probably unfair. There are plenty of more than competent female police officers that would do their job and would not cower like that. It's just, I get concerned about Australia thinking, oh, yeah, well, even though the male who applied for this job is more qualified, we're going to give it to the female to make our numbers look better so we can go boast about it in the woke world. That's the problem. Look, as long as they meet all the qualifications and criteria and do their job and honor their obligations, I'm all for it. But when you go hide like that...
If you can meet the standard. Don't lower the standard to change statistics.
And the latter has been a trend in our country. Remember the Air Force under Joe Biden, like changing the uniforms like to accommodate a pregnant pilot or some crap like that? They don't need to be flying F-16s probably when they're pregnant. Oh, man. We had more texts. Sorry I couldn't get to them today. We're out of here today, however. We're back tomorrow. Stay safe and God bless.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.